Something catastrophic is unfolding deep inside Russia's own borders, a slow-motion strategic disaster that Vladimir Putin never saw coming, or perhaps chose to ignore until it was too late. And when I tell you how Putin's obsession with his Western adventure in Ukraine is causing him to lose effective control over nearly 40% of Russia's entire territory, you're going to understand why this could mark one of the largest collapses in modern history. We're not talking about battlefield losses in Ukraine. We're not talking about sanctions or diplomatic isolation. I'm talking about the vast Russian Far East, a colossal region spanning nearly 40% of Russia's landmass, rich in minerals, timber, oil, gas, and strategic ports being quietly abandoned, economically hollowed out, demographically devastated, and effectively handed over to growing Chinese influence, while Moscow pours every available resource into the war against Ukraine. Stay with me because this story reveals the true cost of Putin's priorities, a power vacuum in the East that is reshaping Russia's future in ways that could prove irreversible, and it is accelerating right now. Let's start with the sheer scale of what we're dealing with. The Russian Far East is enormous, larger than the combined territory of many major nations. It stretches from the Pacific coast deep into Siberia, containing critical assets like the Pacific Fleet, enormous resource deposits, and the vital Baikal-Amur mainline railway. Yet this massive expanse is home to only around 8 million people, a population that has been shrinking for decades and is now in free fall. Harsh conditions have always challenged the region, temperatures plunging to minus 40 degrees Celsius or lower in winter, vast distances, and unforgiving terrain. But under Putin, the situation has deteriorated dramatically. With the Kremlin's budget, military manpower, and political attention funneled overwhelmingly toward the NATO border and the conflict in Ukraine, maintenance and investment in the East have essentially collapsed. Logistics networks are failing, roads crumble, ports struggle, and entire communities are turning into ghost towns. Take regions like Chukotka and Magadan. These remote areas, once important for resource extraction and strategic positioning, are rapidly emptying out. Young people, especially ethnic Russians, are fleeing westward in search of better opportunities or leaving the country entirely. Settlements that once supported mining, fishing, and military outposts now stand half abandoned, with failing infrastructure that no one has the resources to repair. The demographic crisis is so severe that entire villages have simply ceased to function as viable communities. The critical Baikal-Amur main line, the BAM Railway, a strategic lifeline parallel to the aging Trans-Siberian, was supposed to be modernized to unlock the region's full economic potential. Instead, those projects have stalled or been severely scaled back because of the war economy. Billions that should have gone into rail upgrades, bridges, and energy infrastructure are now burning in Ukraine. The result? Supply chains break down in the dead of winter, isolated communities go without reliable power or goods, and the region's ability to contribute to Russia's national strength evaporates. Exploiting this massive power vacuum with remarkable discipline, China has launched a silent, multi-billion-dollar economic annexation. Beijing is not sending tanks across the border. Instead, it is using smart, patient economic tools, investments in mining, energy, infrastructure, and trade networks to tie the Russian Far East ever tighter to Chinese supply chains. Chinese companies are stepping into abandoned projects, Chinese workers are filling labor gaps, and on official Chinese maps and educational materials, cities like Vladivostok are increasingly referred to by their historical Chinese names, such as Haishenwai. This is soft power combined with hard economics on a grand scale. Moscow's response to the labor crisis has been equally desperate and revealing. To keep basic operations running in logging, construction, and resource extraction, the Kremlin has imported thousands of North Korean workers under brutal Soviet-style conditions that echo the darkest days of the Gulag. These workers face restricted movement, harsh discipline, low pay, and dangerous conditions, all to prop up an economy that native Russians are abandoning. It is a humiliating spectacle for a supposed great power, relying on North Korean labor to hold together territory it claims as its own. This is the direct and predictable result of Putin's catastrophic strategic blunder. By prioritizing the fantasy of conquering Ukraine and confronting NATO in the West, the Kremlin has left the Far East defenseless against internal decay and external influence. The same leadership that talks endlessly about historic Russian lands and protecting ethnic Russians is presiding over the slow disintegration of Russia's eastern frontier, the very region that gives Russia its claim to being a Pacific power and a truly transcontinental state. Think about the military implications. The Pacific Fleet, based in Vladivostok, depends on the surrounding region for support, recruitment, and logistics. As the population collapses and infrastructure decays, readiness suffers. Ship maintenance, personnel shortages, and supply issues compound. Meanwhile, resources that could modernize these forces are diverted to the meat grinder in Ukraine. Russia's strategic depth in the east is eroding from within at the exact moment when global power dynamics in the Pacific are shifting. Economically, the costs are staggering. The Far East holds some of the world's largest untapped reserves of rare earth minerals, timber, fish, oil, and natural gas. Losing functional control over this region doesn't just hurt pride, it weakens Russia's long-term economic independence and bargaining power on the global stage. Every ruble and every soldier sent west accelerates the collapse in the east. This isn't a temporary setback. It's a historic misallocation of national priorities playing out in real time. Putin bet everything on subjugating Ukraine and restoring imperial glory through military force. Instead, he is watching nearly 40% of his country's territory atrophy, depopulate, and fall under increasing Chinese economic sway. The demographic trends are particularly damning: birth rates low, outmigration high, and the remaining population aging rapidly. Western intelligence and regional analysts have been tracking this for years, but the war has dramatically accelerated the process. What was a slow bleed has become a hemorrhage. Ghost towns in the tundra, under-maintained railways that are critical for both commerce and national defense, a Pacific coastline that increasingly looks toward Beijing rather than Moscow for its future. The human cost is immense as well. Families broken apart by migration, communities left without basic services, workers, both Russian and imported North Korean, enduring brutal conditions in one of the harshest environments on Earth, all because the center of power in the Kremlin has turned its back on half the map. Russia's Far East is collapsing. Putin is losing 40% of his country, not through foreign invasion, but through chronic neglect, disastrous priorities, and strategic myopia. The silent economic annexation continues. The demographic crisis deepens with every passing month, and the consequences for Russia's future as a coherent, sovereign, great power could be far more profound and lasting than anything happening on the battlefields of Ukraine. This is one of those developments that changes the map, not with tanks and artillery, but with empty villages, redirected money flows, foreign influence, and abandoned railways. It exposes the hollowness of Putin's imperial ambitions. While he chases victory in the West, the East is slipping away. I will keep watching every development in this unfolding internal collapse, breaking it down with the full picture, and asking the only question that matters: what happens next?